He didn't look too comfortable and looked quite concerned, so the body language didn't look fantastic.
The horrific sight of injuries alongside another pre-season fixture and the future of Aaron Wan-Bissaka. It's all coming up with much, much more on the latest episode of the Theatre of Red. Coming to you a day earlier this week as a result of some personal matters that require my attention. Of course, you're all very welcome to the latest installation of the Theatre of Red as Manchester United continues its pre-season festivities. The daily rumour mill continues to spin with a barrage of speculation. Joining me this week is a man who walked the famous Carrington path, debuting for Manchester United before enjoying a footballing journey through Barnsley and on to the likes of Blackpool and Bury, as well as making 3 senior appearances for the Welsh national team. Mr. Daniel Nardiello, how are you today, my man?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for the nice introduction. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
There's almost so much information for us to speak about. It's hard to know where to start. But firstly, as everyone is listening, Eric Ten Hag's side have completed their 4th pre-season outing against Real Betis in San Diego. Now, myself and Dan are speaking before the 3 a.m. kickoff, so hopefully nothing of damage has occurred between here and then. Factoring in the 3 outings against Rosenborg, Rangers and Arsenal to date, how have you felt about what you've seen and the integration of several promising youngsters into the first team setup?
Yeah, I think it's been some really positive play. I think the results maybe not have gone 100% our way in those games, but there's been some really, really nice passages of play where United have shown some really, really good class on the ball, some composure on the ball into good attacking positions, and it only pre-seasons. I've played many pre-seasons, and you can get a lot from pre-season in terms of fitness and getting to know the lads, especially the young lads coming through, giving them the experience. So the young lads that have come on have done well, and yeah, it will be abundance of experience for them to take on to their career, whether that's at Man United or somewhere else. But they've been impressive, and I've been impressed, like I say, with some of the passages of play and how they've performed.
Pre-season is a funny one, and it is something that I wanted to touch upon with you because you've been there. You scale back a few years and you look at the pre-season under Louis van Gaal. Everybody was waxing lyrical about just how impressive the side was when they went on this imperious run, beating the likes of Real Madrid. And then obviously we saw what happened thereafter when the side capitulated when the Premier League started. So many people get into this convoluted ideal about what pre-season should actually be. I haven't done it at a professional level, but in my personal take on this, it's about developing fitness and just building harmony within the squad and integrating various different bodies into that. Do you think that there is much of an onus on going out and getting victory, or is it more about creating passages of play and being able to develop continuity?
Results don't really matter. As long as you can see there's a pattern of play, the young lads come in and do their job, and it's about letting the first team, the reserve team, the under 19s, 17s, whatever it is, there's got to be a style of play that goes through the entire unit at Manchester United. So those lads bringing the young lads in and playing the way that Ten Hag wants them to play will really benefit them, and they can take that into the reserves and youth teams, to get them playing and ticking in the right kind of way as well. Yes, you want to win games, but ultimately, it's about the fitness. It's about getting the team ticking and getting right for the start of the season. So I wouldn't take too much disappointment from the losses. As long as the players are coming back in, they're getting their fitness. We want to stay injury-free, which hasn't been the case, as we've seen a couple, in the games that we've watched. But it's all about that fitness and getting back together as a team and get ticking so it's ready for kickoff.
With those youngsters, I think one of them that's really stood out to me, he's impressed massively with 3 cameos, is young Tubby Collier. I think when factoring all of the youngsters who are getting an opportunity, he is the one who's looked head and shoulders above all throughout each of the minutes that he's played. I see an opposing 20-year-old who appears to have a similar mentality to Kobbie Mainoo, in that he doesn't appear to be overawed by the prospect of playing for the senior side. How do you feel about the midfielder from what you've seen?
He looks very, very impressive. He looks very composed. He's up and down the pitch. And like you say, it doesn't seem to faze him whatsoever. These are the perfect environments for these type of players to come in because there's no real pressure on them. It's pre-season. It's abroad as well. And they're in there with a mix of other young lads and some first team players. So it's not like an official first team game like Premier League game. But the kid's done absolutely amazing. And he does look like one for the future. And to make it a Manchester United or any big club, you've got to have that no fear approach and just get out there, do your business. And on first impressions, I hadn't heard much about the lad. He looks magnificent. So you don't want to put too much pressure on the lad, because all we're seeing on Twitter, especially if you follow a Man United page, is all about the young boy Collier. But I mean, that can only encourage him more and push him on. So the manager does tend to look after younger players, slowly breed them into the team. So the kid looks like he could have a big future, but we've got to give him time. He is still a young lad, but the first few games that we've seen has been magnificent.
It obviously was reminiscent of 12 months ago in the League Cup final, when you had those scenes with Ten Hag putting his arm around Mainu at Wembley and sort of laying upon him that this is all going to be yours. You have the opportunity to do so. And then at the end of the FA Cup final against City, we saw the exact same thing with Collier. But another name worth mentioning, largely because of his performance against Arsenal, is Harry Amas. At 17, he's really emerged as a promising talent on the flank alongside Rashford, especially in LA. And I know that he is the reason that Alvaro Fernandez was let go, because the club obviously thinks so highly of him. What we saw against Arsenal, even though it was a friendly, it was highly positive from a 17-year-old fullback.
It was. I did think that Collier was the main standout players over the games, but the young lad Amas doing what he did, playing and again just showing that level of composure and being comfortable in that environment and being able to play. And like you touched on, Ten Hag with his young players, he puts his arm around them, he looks after them, he can see a player. I know people have different opinions of Erik Ten Hag, but Ten Hag can see a player. And the young lads that seem to be coming through, I really do believe that he can kind of nurture these talents, bring them into the side when needed, and help them really progress with their career at Manchester United. And the two that we've mentioned today do look like the better two that of the games that we've watched.
Yeah, and I suppose outside of the obvious talents that they have, it's always refreshing when you can potentially save X amount of millions because these academy players come through. One thing that you touched on, and I just wanted to get the natural sort of plaudits for the academy players out of the way before getting into it, because it's dreary and it's impossible to discuss that Arsenal fixture and not mention the injuries to Rasmus Højlund and to Lenny Yoro. Højlund, for all intents and purposes, looks like a hamstring injury, although it is speculative. And as I said, we are recording before any news of the injury has been confirmed. But in Yoro, it looked a little serious. And I think the lack of communication from the club to this point is rather concerning. As a former player who's endured your share of injuries in your time as well, is there anything that can be said about body language or movement that caught your eye with that particular situation during the water break?
Yeah, I agree with Højlund. I think, it does look like hamstring. It could be out for a few weeks, but it doesn't look too serious. You think you can recover from those kind of injuries fairly quickly, but albeit we don't know the exact diagnosis yet. With Lenny, it was kind of innocuous, wasn't it? We didn't really know, and then you saw the water break and yeah, it didn't look good. He didn't look positive. And you kind of know when, as a player, as you said, I've had plenty of injuries over the years. It really hampered my career. And I knew instantaneously if it was a slight one or if it was an extreme one. And he didn't look too comfortable and look quite concerned. So I know we're speculating. I hope we're completely wrong, but the body language didn't look fantastic. But then I have to counterbalance that, I have had players who just get really, really annoyed just by having a little nick and being out for a few days, and it really sets them back a few days, or gets them thinking in a negative way. So hopefully it's not too bad. But from what we've seen, and like you say, during the water break, his body language, it didn't look fantastic, if I'm honest, but hopefully we are wrong.
You almost shudder to think that this is a possibility because everything is speculative, but the word metatarsal is starting to make its way around the place. And if we anticipate something like that, you could be looking at anything from 6 weeks to 6 months, depending on the rehabilitation, the surgery, and how he responds to the surgery. Given that this is an 18-year-old that we have brought in to replace Raphael Varane, Just how important is a move for the like of Matthias de Ligt at this moment in time, considering the situation?
Well, it seems even more crucial now if it is the injury that we're speculating about. I think I know it's on the cards anyway, but with the fact that Lenny could have that injury, getting someone like him is crucial now, and it may give the powers that be the kick up the backside to really get it going and get him into the club. So again, hopefully it's not as bad as we're first thinking, but I'd like de Ligt anyway. I think it really adds a hell of a lot of quality to our back line, but we'll see. Hopefully we get some information soon, and it's not as bad as we first fear.
I too like de Ligt. I'm a massive admirer. And I think a lot of people, because he's been around for so long, people just sort of anticipate that this is a guy who's approaching his late 20s into his 30s, when really and truly he's still a young 20-year-old who's not even entering the peak of his powers. But at Bayern, it also appears imminent for Mazraoui. We look at a scenario where we see Aaron Wan-Bissaka potentially moving to West Ham, with Mazraoui coming in to replace him in the Northwest. He's a 26-year-old who's played under Ten Hag for 5 seasons at Ajax. He's a natural right back, but is equally capable on the left flank, who understands the attacking principles of the manager and knows the demands that he sets out. Would you view Wan-Bissaka leaving for an unknown variable in Manchester as a shrewd move when considering this?
Well, first and foremost, I'm a little disappointed that Wan-Bissaka is leaving, or could be leaving to West Ham. Reading about it last night, I love Wan-Bissaka, and I know I might be in the minority here, but I love how defensively minded he is and how good he is at one-on-ones. He's improved immensely under Ten Hag, but you've got to trust Ten Hag, and like you said, Ten Hag's had this Nazari for 5 years at Ajax. He's had a decent career at Bayern as well. He can play on both flanks, like you said, as well. So the nightmares we've had at fullback over the last few years and injuries has just been insane. So I'm just at the process now. I'm just at the thinking now of trust Ten Hag and certain players that he may want, and also trust the likes of Barada and Radcliffe and the players they bring in, because they seem to be bringing in players to suit how they want to play, and players that they trust or know of. So yeah, a shrewd move. I'll be interested to see how he does if he does come over, because I've heard mixed reports about the player. But like I say, we've got to trust the manager, got to trust the process, and they're trying to build a team that can challenge for the Premier League over the next couple of years.
I've seen a lot of people take that stance that you have with Wan-Bissaka. I didn't realise as much of the fan base was supportive of him as there actually has appeared to be, especially on social media. I've always been a massive admirer of Wan-Bissaka. I think when you look at him, first and foremost, from what a defender should do defensively, especially with one-on-ones, he's at the very, very top echelon of these fullbacks to be able to mark a winger out of it. However, I'm trying to look at it as pragmatically as I can. And when we consider Ten Hag alongside Van Nistelrooy and Hake, and as you mentioned, with Barada, Wilcox, and the structure that's trying to be implemented within the club, with Dan Ashworth overseeing all, it's all about attacking principles, attacking philosophies. And you only have to look as far as Harry Amas, who we discussed against Arsenal, and just how positive and beneficial he was in the left flank with Rashford. I know Wan-Bissaka has been here for several years, and I know he's hardly poor on building up attacks on that particular right flank. But when you consider the necessity for a very shrewd attacking player to complement what we have down that side of the pitch, does Wan-Bissaka lack in that side of the avenue for Ten Hag to be able to progress forward?
I think that's what Ten Hag thinks, and what the likes of Wilcox, Barada, Ashworth think. I think that's their thought process. However, I'm of the belief that he's just come on heaps and bounds in a very short period under Ten Hag. He's had a couple of injuries in there as well, which is why I come back to the thought process of trusting the process and trusting the people in power, because they know what they want. They know what they see day in, day out at training, and they feel that this Nazari could be really, really good and more attacking. And like you said, Amas has that ability to go forward attacking wise as well. So yes, that could. Well, I think that is the reason. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's bang on. But I just, from a personal perspective, I've just been really, really impressed with Wan-Bissaka and how much he's improved. But trust the process. If he goes off to West Ham and this lad comes in and lights up that right side or left side, wherever he's playing, we'll all be happy.
Absolutely. It's all about trusting the manager. If we're going to look at the players he wants to bring in and try to trust that particular process, then we have to do the same with the players that he's willing to offload. But I suppose as well as that, there's also the line that it would appear Wan-Bissaka is keen on a return back to London. And then you have the financial dilemma within the club where he's out of contract next year. And it's a case of acting now to try to recoup some of the transfer fee that was paid. Moving away from pre-season for a moment and focusing on the news that has surfaced at the beginning of the week regarding Old Trafford. A designated task force continues their research into the pros and the cons of renovation versus a new build. Now, according to Laurie Whitwell in The Athletic, the group are currently in favour of a new build adjacent to Old Trafford at a cost in excess of $2 billion with a 100,000 capacity stadium. It's said that the task force are very, very keen on ensuring that the principles and the core foundations of Manchester United remains at the heart of any potential build, even down to something as simple as the red brick effect going in for the industrial side of the club. But having been a part of the team that called the Theatre of Dreams home, where do you stand on the conversation of renovation versus new build?
Yeah, it's a big conversation point, isn't it? I think we've seen it from multiple other clubs over the last few years. But let's be honest, United, are the biggest club in England, and I think moving away from our iconic stadium is a huge step. I mean, I was a Coventry City fan growing up, and they're moving away from Highfield Road. It was like, oh, I can't move away from Highfield Road. But I think as time goes on, as football progresses, I think Old Trafford has run its course. We've all seen the problems that they've had over the last few years, specifically with the flooding not too long back. I think a new stadium, 100,000-seater stadium, we'd have no problems whatsoever filling that stadium. I think it can bring a hell of a lot to the club going forward. I understand that, the Theatre of Dreams and Old Trafford as a fun place in many fans' hearts, but the club is moving on from where it has been in the past, and the fact that it's going to be just down the road is a nice touch. I think still going to be in the Old Trafford area, so I think it's a really positive step if they just decide to do that. Albeit it will be sad leaving Old Trafford, but I do think it has run its course, and United could go on to bigger and better things with this 100,000-seater stadium.
I get the commercial side of it, and obviously from the viewpoint of hierarchy, it's about keeping up with the Joneses when so many of your rivals are developing new stadiums. And obviously it's something that stands very front and centre with Sir Jim Radcliffe. We saw in his Bloomberg interview a little over a month ago how he continuously referenced Real Madrid and their state-of-the-art new stadium alongside the success that they've had on the field. Outside of keeping up with those sides and trying to generate the Wembley of the North, as he's also referenced many times, I want to know from a playing perspective, Manchester United are always in the market to attract the best players that they possibly can, whether they're senior players or whether they're academy prospects, to come in and to grow and to generate and to eventually line out on that football field. Given what you've referenced with the leaks in Old Trafford, and we'll say areas that it's quite clear that paint has just been put on over rust, for example, because of the neglect of the Glazer hierarchy and the ownership over the last 2 decades. And do you feel that images of that going out on social media on Sky Sports would affect, we'll say, the mindset of players that are considering options of moving to Manchester or to somebody else? In 2024, would that have a great impact on trying to attract these individuals to come to the Northwest?
I don't think you can be easily put off joining Manchester United. I know we haven't been the Manchester United of old over the last few years. I mean, we've started to win a couple of trophies, obviously, in the last couple of years. But I think if you've got Manchester United interested in you, you're gonna consider it, aren't you? Whoever you are, you're going to consider that option. There's very few clubs that players would choose over Manchester United. You're talking about maybe at the moment, the huge clubs like Real Madrid and stuff like that, and maybe Bayern and bigger clubs in the sense of they're still achieving the big things in the country where they're winning leagues and European Cups and stuff like that. But there's very, very few players that wouldn't consider Manchester United. So looking at the stadium, how it is, I don't think that would be too much of a concern for players coming here. However, I do think that he could push you over the edge to sign for Manchester United, knowing that they have got a £2 billion, 100,000-seater stadium on the cards. So, I don't, like I say, in one way, yes, it would push you over the edge to sign them. But no, seeing a few leaks and the rust and whatever you mentioned, I don't think that would put a player off, because especially now with the structure that we've got in place, and people can actually start to believe and really see that United are going places.
I suppose I'm looking at it totally from a personal point of view, as an individual who's been going to Old Trafford since the 80s, as someone who's gone with my father, and I've started bringing my children. It's almost a generational thing, and with the amazing memories that are there, I can understand from one perspective the difficulties that would be faced upon trying to house and relocate the 50,000+ season ticket holders, and the difficulties they would encounter with that. But a part of me is just being stubborn, Daniel. I'm just looking at this and I'm thinking that a renovation is something that we have to do, because this is Old Trafford. And regardless of what these other stadiums are being pushed out around the place, one of the biggest things that hits me about these new stadiums that I've visited, there's such a lack of atmosphere inside them. They're so soulless.
Exactly.
And that really worries me about a 100,000-seater stadium. It's not difficulty in filling it. It's that, are you going to lose additional atmosphere by putting another 20,000+ individuals in there?
Totally agree with you, and I suppose that was my next comment I was going to make. I think you've got to design this stadium so it doesn't lose that effect. I mean, you go to the likes of Old Trafford, and dare I say, at Liverpool, when the crowd's buzzing, they're on top of you. You can hear it, and the old school stadiums, they are absolutely immense for the atmosphere when the fans are behind them. So that's got to be part of the planning. That's got to be, thought about. I know they were talking about, I may have read this wrong, but the Chicago Bears Stadium, that they like the look of the Chicago Bears Stadium in the States. So it's crucial that United can keep that, close proximity of the fans close to the pitch and really generate that atmosphere, because you're right, some of the new stadiums, even though there's more people there, it's dead.
By all accounts from these reports, I think Jim Radcliffe has set a deadline by the end of 2024 for his task group to basically surface all the KPIs and the pros and cons of both, to be able to establish a clear motive in what they're going to do in moving forward. And from my stubborn perspective, I hope renovation will somehow manage to prevail, but it's not looking like that from now. But one man, Dan, that has made the return to Old Trafford is Ruud van Nistelrooy. And he's a man that you spent plenty of time with, one of the finest finishers that the game has ever seen, a legend with an array of experience to assist all of the forwards at the club. As a former player who's been there with him and knows the man, what was your initial thoughts when news broke of the Dutchman returning?
Really pleased. I think bringing a legend like that back to the club, it can only have positive effects. I think he's shown as well, in the stint he's had in management and coaching, that he's obviously decent at what he does, and players will respect him. I know you look at coaches and managers in the past that I've played under or I've seen at bigger clubs. Ruud will demand and will get that ultimate respect from players immediately, because he's done everything for the club and other clubs. So yeah, really, really, really happy. And from a selfish point of view as well, I've got a Holland shirt when we played Holland for Wales that he never signed for me after the game. He swapped the shirts with me, which I was really happy about, but I forgot to get it signed. So hopefully I can bump into him and get it signed at some point, because now he's back in Manchester.
That's fantastic. And it's something that I was really keen about, because I've spoke with so many individuals on this. The vast majority have the opinion of what you've had, that this is going to be nothing but beneficial. Some individuals have maybe looked otherwise and sort of laid it on the players themselves. But as a guy who has grown up and played alongside veteran footballers, when you factor Højlund, the new signing in Joshua Zirkzee, looking at the likes of Marcus Rashford, Alejandro Garnacho, Amad Diallo, and more, just how beneficial will it be in aiding with their development in everything from movement to the dark arts, and just from wily tricks of the trade that he's picked up throughout his career?
Oh, yeah. I think whatever he says, they're going to listen to. They have to listen to, or it's not worthwhile them being at the club, especially the young lads. Like you said, the Zirkzee, the Højlunds, and Rashford's to an extent as well. But the young lads coming through, learning off someone like that, I mean, it's just an absolute dream. One of the best strikers, Manchester United have ever had. Fantastic for Holland, and obviously fantastic for Real Madrid as well. So I remember just on a lesser level learning from strikers that I looked up to and played, Premier League football when they were coaching me. And you tend to listen to them more, you tend to respect them more because they've been there, they've done that, and they know what they're talking about. So like I say, he'll demand that respect, and he will get the respect off those players.
With the man we just mentioned in Joshua Zirkzee, obviously he has come through and been a real integral cog for Thiago Motta's Bologna side that have qualified for the Champions League for the first time in quite some time. In that system, he was deployed sort of further back, and he was almost a creator and a facilitator for the wing players at the football club. He offers an entirely different dynamic to what Rasmus Højlund offers, in that Højlund is fantastic breaking the channels on the outside and utilising his physicality. In Zirkzee, an in-between man who links midfield to wing and attack, but he also has the capacity to affect the game in the final third. When you have that different dynamic, do you think the coaching staff are eyeing up the possibility of both men being on the field at the same time to incorporate the 90s adage of two men up top?
It would be interesting, let's put it that way. I've got to be brutally honest, I don't know too much about the lad Zirkzee. I've seen clips. I've read reports about him and how positive they are. I know he had a fantastic year, as Bologna did as a whole last season. They could complement each other. They really could, and it would be interesting to see how that would work. Maybe Zirkzee could play out wide and drift inside and have that aspect, or play just off Højlund. There's plenty of things to be done there. Whether the traditional 4-4-2 comes back, I don't believe that will be the case. But there could be, an argument to say they could both, complement each other, work well off each other. But then it's just a case of whose place would he be taking if there were like that, old school two players up front. But that's only a positive for the club and the manager. If he sees, certain games where that could work, again, we've got to trust the process, trust the manager. But it will be interesting going forward. But they're both very young players. They've got a lot to learn. They're in the right place to learn. They've got the right people around them to learn. So it will be interesting to see what direction Ten Hag goes in utilising both of those guys.
Yeah, as much as I like to fixate on the ideals of being able to regenerate a classic 4-4-2 with a big man and a little man up top, this, like my stubbornness in trying to renovate Old Trafford, is something that I'm just, it's an ideal that I hold myself. I think those days are well and truly gone, but I really hope that there's some side in the Premier League this year that starts bringing this back with a force and try to rejuvenate and put a modern player on it. But everything considered, Dan, and everything that we know and the possibilities of the further players to come forward, I have to keep my trend going and ask you one final question before we finish up. What do you feel is an acceptable season for Erik ten Hag in 2024-25?
Good question. I won't get carried away. I think United realistically need to finish third as a minimum. I think that he's shown great promise in the last couple of years. I know the Premier League wasn't fantastic last year. I do have sympathy for the amount of injuries they had. So I do give Ten Hag, give him a bit of leeway there. But I think he's done fantastic in the 2 seasons, winning 2 competitions. But realistically, it's got to turn back towards the Premier League now. And that is vital. Premier League, Champions League football, and third as a minimum. Yes, I'd like us to do well in the Europa or, a couple of cup competitions, go as far as we possibly can. Maybe win one of those cup competitions. But realistically, Premier League has got to be at the forefront now. And as a minimum, third place. But I wouldn't be surprised if we came second.
That's mirroring what a lot of people are saying. It's a crying out for a return to top 4 with some sort of a designated style of play that's actually appealing and something that fans can drag on to moving forward. Adding on to what you have said, do you buy into what Solskjaer said all those years ago, that silverware can mask a lack of progression at a football club?
Yes, I do agree with that, actually. But I don't think that's the case here. I know people have been a bit frustrated for the style of play and how the team has performed in the Premier League. But I genuinely put that down to a hell of a lot of injuries last year and the structure behind Ten Hag, not Ten Hag. We have had a couple of time wasters in terms of players as well that needed shipping out and getting out, which has happened. So I really do think Ten Hag is the man for the job. But he has to prove himself in the Premier League this year because there's no hiding place now. He has to perform. They have to have a consistent season, finish top 4, but third is realistic for me. I think that's as a minimum. But yeah, so to answer your question, I do agree with it, but I don't think it's the case here.
I agree totally. I mean, I've been one of the most vocal supporters of Ten Hag since he arrived, and I've really, really championed the fact that there's so many mitigating factors that have resulted in the various issues that occurred, particularly last year during that Jekyll and Hyde campaign. But on that, it has been absolutely excellent chatting with you today, sir. Have you anything coming up in the coming weeks and months?
Not a lot. Life's very different now. I've finished playing football. I'm in a real job now. I'm having to work. So no, looking forward to the season starting. That's the main thing. I do miss the football when it's not on. Holiday booked with the family in a couple of weeks and a Greek cruise. So luckily enough, actually, I'm in Rome for the first game. It's Fulham, isn't it, on the Friday night? And then I'm also on the cruise ship a week later when we play. I can't remember who it is, the second game. So I'll get to watch a few games anyway whilst away, which is nice.
Well, I'm sure it's well deserved, my man. And if anybody wants to continue the conversation with you, what's the best way of getting in touch?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm all the social media websites. So I need to be a little bit more active on Twitter. I tend to be more of a reader of your tweets specifically. I always find those interesting and reading the articles and what have you. So yeah, Twitter's probably the best place.
I didn't pay him anything to say that, ladies and gentlemen. That came solely from him. But as always, if you want to get in touch with me and read those, you can do so at Shaun Connolly 85 on Twitter. And please be sure to follow the theatre_of_red across every social platform. But most importantly, please hit subscribe wherever you are listening today, because your support continues to help the growth of the channel and all of these podcasts that we're popping out on a weekly basis. Until next week, thanks for tuning in. Have a great weekend.